When the night shift bell rang, it was already past midnight. I worked at a small gas station on the south side of the city, right off the highway. 5 years in the same place, the same routine. Every night, the same smoke breaks, the same tired customers, the same silence. My life drifted by like a silent film. The air that night was cool, the streets empty, the lights dimmed into a pale yellow haze. As I walked home, I felt an odd calmness inside me, but beneath it was something else. A strange sense that something was about to change. I turned the key and stepped into my apartment, flicking on the lights. The metallic scent of the tiny kitchen, the soft rattle of the wind against the window. Everything was familiar. I hung up my jacket and sat down at the computer. For weeks, a story idea had been spinning in my head. Writing had become my way of giving meaning to my dull routine. Lately, though, the story had started to shape itself, as if it didn't need me to guide it. That night, I decided I was going to start. I opened a blank document. The white glow of the screen stung my eyes. My hands hovered over the keyboard for a few seconds before they started typing on their own. The first sentence flowed out effortlessly. That night, the killer's footsteps echoed down the street. It felt so natural, as if someone else were writing through me. The character, the setting, the murder, all of it appeared vividly in my mind. I lost track of time as I wrote. My coffee went cold, the brightness of the screen dimmed, but my fingers never stopped. The story poured out, and I was merely a conduit. By the time I finished, it was nearly 3 a.m. My eyes burned as I typed the last line, and the sound of the footsteps slowly faded away. I saved the file and shut down the computer. I poured myself a glass of water and looked out through the gap in the curtains. The street was empty, blanketed in a thin fog. Then, at the corner of the building, a shadow moved. At first, I thought it was just a branch swaying in the wind. But then I heard it. A sharp, short, strangled scream. The glass slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. I pressed closer to the window. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then, 2 silhouettes appeared at the corner of the street. One was still. The other moved quickly away. I don't remember deciding to, but I grabbed my hoodie and ran downstairs. The cold hit my face as soon as I stepped outside. The asphalt was slick, the streetlights flickering weakly. When I reached the corner, I saw her. A woman slumped against the wall, motionless. I knelt beside her, called out, but she didn't respond. My hands came away wet, blood. My voice trembled as I whispered, "Oh God." I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911. My fingers slipped against the screen. Minutes later, sirens echoed through the street. Police arrived. Questions followed, but I had no answers. I didn't know what I had seen. The only thing I knew for certain was that the scene I had just witnessed was identical to the one I'd written hours before. By the time I got home at dawn, my eyelids felt like lead. I collapsed into bed. But every time I closed my eyes, the scene replayed. The woman's face, the silence of the street, the echo that hung in the air. When my alarm went off, I dragged myself to work. I couldn't focus on anything. My thoughts were wrapped in fog. My boss asked if I was okay. I said I hadn't slept well. I didn't tell him the truth. Who would believe me? When I got home that evening, everything looked normal. The yellow police tape was still outside, but I ignored it. I turned on my computer and opened the file. The first line stared back at me. That night, the killer's footsteps echoed down the street. My chest tightened. My own words no longer felt like mine. I told myself it was a coincidence, that my mind was just connecting things that weren't connected. But the chill in my stomach wouldn't go away. To distract myself, I kept writing. In the second chapter, a man investigating the murder met an old man on a park bench. The old man said, "You can't trust anyone anymore. Everyone wears a mask," then tapped his cane on the ground and walked away. The moment I finished writing that line, the hair on my arms stood up. I needed air. I grabbed my jacket and went outside. There was a small park a few blocks from my apartment. Quiet, simple, lined with benches. I sat down, lit a cigarette, and let my thoughts wander. Then I heard it, the sound of a cane striking the ground. I turned my head. An old man stood nearby watching me. His face was hard, unreadable. He tapped his cane lightly, motioned to the empty spot beside me. I nodded. We sat in silence for a while before he spoke. His voice was low, almost swallowed by the wind. But one sentence reached me clearly. "You can't trust anyone anymore." My blood ran cold. Before I could say anything, he stood up, tapped his cane once more, and walked away. I went home trembling, trying to convince myself that it was nothing more than coincidence. My brain was tired, and I'd been living inside the story for too long. Maybe I was just noticing things that fit. The mind sees what it wants to see. But when I reread what I'd written, the details matched exactly. The cane, the words, even the way the man walked away, it was all there. The blinking cursor on the screen pulsed like a heartbeat. Still, I kept writing because stopping felt even more dangerous. The next day at work started like any other. Around noon, a black SUV pulled into the station. The driver's face was hidden by the glare of the windshield. He filled up, then came inside to pay. The engine stayed running. I was outside checking the pumps when a woman walked in. Her eyes were wide, unfocused. She drifted between the aisles, moving strangely, as if she didn't know where she was. At one point, she looked straight at me, and a chill went through my spine. The man came out to say something about the pump, and we fixed it quickly. He got back into the SUV and drove off. As I turned to go inside, the woman was standing right in front of the door. I almost ran into her. I stumbled back, nearly falling into the street, just as a car sped by. I caught my balance at the last second. She didn't flinch. She just stared at me for a moment, then turned and walked away. When I got home, her face was still burned into my mind. I sat down at my computer and began the third chapter. My character met a woman at a gas station. Her eyes were wide, her face blank. As he backed away from her, he nearly stepped into oncoming traffic. My fingers shook as I typed the final sentence. And then, he heard the sound he feared most. Tap, tap, tap. I leaned back in my chair. Every scene I had written had now happened to me. The murder, the old man, the woman, everything. My story wasn't fiction anymore. It was writing itself through me. I tried to calm down. It's just exhaustion, I told myself. I was mixing reality and fiction. But another voice whispered inside me. Maybe the story wants to be written. Maybe I'm just the messenger. I took a deep breath, turned off the lights. Only the dim glow of the monitor lit the room. A faint hum came from outside, then silence. I sat motionless, hands hovering over the keyboard. Then, from inside the apartment, came a sound. 3 short knocks. My body froze. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. Maybe it was the building settling, maybe the wind. Then it came again, louder. I stood up slowly, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. I turned back to the computer. The last line on the screen read, and then he heard the sound he feared most. Tap, tap, tap. The third knock came. Harder this time. I jumped to my feet. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. The letters seemed to shift, like the story was alive. I decided to delete it. I erased the killer's scene, changed the ending. The killer was gone forever, I wrote. I saved the file and shut down the computer. Silence. Minutes passed. My heartbeat slowed. Maybe it was all over. Maybe it had just been a breakdown. I poured some coffee, sat on the couch, and took a deep breath. Then, from outside, came the sound again. 3 heavy knocks. The door shook this time. My pen is on the table now. I'm writing these lines by hand. If no one finds the rest of this note in the coming days, then my story has reached its end. Maybe I was never the author. Maybe I was only the final sentence.